Laura Hobbs, a 9-year-old girl, was brutally attacked with 20 stab wounds in a quiet Zion, Illinois park. Her friend Crystal suffered 11 stab wounds. In a shocking turn of events, Laura's father spent 5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. This case unfolded into one of the most egregious examples of injustice in American history. How did a tragic attack lead to such a severe miscarriage of justice? Zion, Illinois, was a quiet, close-knit community of about 25,000 residents in May 2005. The small town, located along Lake Michigan's western shore, was known for its peaceful atmosphere and strong sense of community. Families often gathered in the local parks, and children played freely in the streets. Among these children were 9-year-old Laura Hobbs and her best friend, 8-year-old Crystal Tobias. The two girls were inseparable, often seen riding their bikes together or playing in Beulah Park, a popular recreational area in Zion. Laura was known for her love of animals, while Crystal had a passion for sports. On May 8, 2005, Mother's Day, the tranquility of Zion was about to be shattered. Laura and Crystal, excited by the warm sunshine, asked their parents if they could go for a bike ride to Beulah Park. Their parents agreed, expecting the girls to return home for dinner as usual. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to set, Laura's mother, Sheila Hollabaugh, grew concerned. The girls hadn't returned home, and it was getting dark. She called Crystal's family, only to discover they hadn't seen the girls either. Worry quickly spread through both households. The families began searching the neighborhood, and soon neighbors joined the effort. The Zion Police Department was notified, and officers joined the growing number of concerned citizens looking for Laura and Crystal. Throughout the night, the search continued, with flashlights piercing the darkness and voices calling out for the missing girls. The next morning, May 9th, brought no relief. Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, joined the search efforts early. He made his way to a wooded area of Beulah Park, an area that hadn't been thoroughly searched the night before. There, in a small clearing, Jerry found the bodies of Laura and Crystal. The girls had been brutally stabbed multiple times. The news spread quickly, and soon the entire town was gripped by shock and grief. The brutal murder of two young girls in their beloved park shattered the sense of safety and innocence that had long defined Zion. Parents held their children closer, neighbors eyed strangers with suspicion, and the carefree atmosphere that once characterized the town vanished overnight. The crime that rocked Zion in May 2005 marked not only the loss of two young lives, but also the loss of a community's peace of mind. In the wake of Jerry Hobbs' grim discovery, police descended upon Beulah Park, transforming the once peaceful area into a bustling crime scene. Forensic teams meticulously combed the wooded clearing, collecting evidence and documenting every detail. The girls' injuries were severe, indicating a brutal attack that shocked investigators and the community alike. As the investigation progressed, detectives learned that other children had seen Laura and Crystal heading towards the park the previous day. This information helped narrow the timeline of events, but it also raised troubling questions about who could have committed such a heinous act in a typically safe community. While the town of Zion reeled from shock, detectives began to look more closely at Jerry Hobbs. His significant criminal history, which included drug-related offenses and violent behavior, immediately raised suspicions among the investigators. Despite being the one who discovered the bodies, Jerry quickly transitioned from grieving father to person of interest. Over the next 24 hours, Jerry faced intense questioning from detectives. The interrogation lasted more than 20 hours, a grueling process designed to wear down suspects and elicit confessions. As the pressure mounted, Jerry's account of events began to shift. Finally, after hours of relentless questioning, Jerry broke down and confessed to murdering his daughter Laura and her friend Crystal. The confession sent shockwaves through the community. Residents, who had been united in grief, now found themselves grappling with disbelief and horror. Police arrested Jerry on the spot, and prosecutors wasted no time in announcing their intention to seek the death penalty. The community, once sympathetic to Jerry's loss, now viewed him with a mix of anger and revulsion. As news of the confession spread, many questioned how they could have been so deceived. Jerry had been part of the search efforts, had discovered the bodies, and had appeared genuinely distraught. The revelation that he might be responsible for the very crime that had devastated the community left many feeling betrayed and vulnerable. The case against Jerry Hobbs seemed straightforward, with his criminal past, discovery of the bodies, and confession all pointing to his guilt. However, as the initial shock wore off, questions began to emerge. Why would a father kill his own daughter? And how could someone with no apparent motive commit such a brutal crime? These questions would linger as the case moved forward, but for now, the focus remained on Jerry Hobbs. His criminal history had made him an easy target for suspicion, and his confession appeared to confirm detectives' worst fears. As Zion struggled to come to terms with this latest twist in the tragic case, few could have imagined the turns the investigation would take in the years to come. Jerry Hobbs' confession initially seemed damning, but as the case progressed, serious doubts emerged. Keith Grant, Jerry's court-appointed lawyer, recognized signs of a coerced admission and challenged the prosecution's case. Jerry had endured over 20 hours of intense questioning, sleep deprivation, and emotional manipulation before confessing. With Grant's support, Jerry retracted his confession, citing the coercive tactics used against him. The most glaring issue in the case was the complete absence of physical evidence linking Jerry to the murders. Despite an extensive search, investigators found no blood, DNA, or other forensic evidence tying him to the brutal stabbings of Laura and Crystal. This lack of physical proof raised serious questions about the strength of the case against Jerry. Grant's persistence led to a crucial discovery. The medical examiners had initially failed to analyze DNA samples collected from the victims' bodies. When finally tested, the results were shocking. Foreign DNA was found on Laura's body, and it didn't match Jerry Hobbs. This new evidence cast serious doubt on Jerry's involvement and suggested the real killer was still at large. Despite the potentially exculpatory nature of the DNA evidence, the prosecution remained steadfast in their belief of Jerry's guilt. They argued that the presence of foreign DNA could be coincidental and didn't necessarily prove Jerry's innocence. This dismissal of crucial evidence would later be seen as a critical mistake in the investigation. The unidentified DNA sample was entered into the FBI's national database, creating a sense of anticipation. As months turned into years, Jerry remained behind bars, waiting for a breakthrough that seemed increasingly unlikely. The wait became agonizing, and Jerry's wrongful imprisonment stretched on, denying justice not only to him, but also to the families of Laura and Crystal, who were left without closure. In retrospect, investigators made a crucial error by fixating on Jerry Hobbs as their primary suspect. Their tunnel vision led them to overlook other potential leads and ignore evidence that didn't fit their theory. This single-minded focus ultimately resulted in years of injustice and a failure to identify the true perpetrator of this heinous crime. 5 years. That's how long Jerry Hobbs spent in prison, wrongfully accused of murdering his daughter Laura and her friend Crystal. His days were filled with isolation, fear, and despair as he grappled with grief and fought to prove his innocence. Jerry's family faced intense scrutiny from their community and the media, their lives forever altered by the tragedy and subsequent accusations. Throughout Jerry's imprisonment, his lawyer worked tirelessly to challenge the validity of his coerced confession and push for further examination of overlooked forensic evidence. The foreign DNA found on Laura's body remained unidentified, a silent witness to the truth that seemed just out of reach. Meanwhile, a series of violent crimes unfolded in Virginia. Jorge Isla Torres, a man with a dark past, was linked to multiple assaults on women and the murder of Amanda Snell, a young Navy intelligence specialist. As the number of attacks grew, law enforcement intensified their efforts to catch the perpetrator. The breakthrough came when Torres was finally arrested after a particularly violent assault. As part of standard procedure, his DNA was collected and added to the FBI database. This seemingly routine action set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences. As Torres's genetic profile was uploaded, tension built in 2 states. In Virginia, investigators hoped for matches to solve their open cases. In Illinois, Jerry Hobbs and his supporters waited, unaware that the key to his freedom was about to be revealed. For 5 long years, Jerry had languished in prison, wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. But as Torres's DNA entered the system, the clock was ticking on one of the most egregious miscarriages of justice in recent memory. The shocking connection between these seemingly unrelated cases was about to come to light, exposing the flaws in a system that had failed to protect the innocent. In the world of forensic science, a single data point can reveal a hidden truth. When Jorge Isla Torres's DNA hit the FBI database, it triggered an immediate match with the foreign DNA found on Laura Hobbs's body. This crucial piece of evidence, overlooked for years, finally pointed to the true perpetrator of the horrific murders in Zion, Illinois. The connection between Torres and the small town quickly became clear. He had lived in the area at the time of the killings before moving to Virginia. With this new evidence, Jerry Hobbs's attorney demanded his immediate release. The prosecutor, faced with irrefutable proof of Jerry's innocence, could not contest. After 5 long years, Jerry Hobbs walked out of prison a free man, forever changed by his ordeal. The aftermath of Jerry's exoneration brought a flurry of legal action and media attention. He filed a lawsuit against the police and authorities, alleging they had coerced a false confession during his interrogation. The case concluded with a settlement of nearly $8 million for his wrongful imprisonment, providing some measure of accountability for the systemic failures that led to his conviction. As Jerry began rebuilding his life, Jorge Isla Torres faced the consequences of his actions. He was convicted of multiple violent crimes in Virginia and Illinois, including the murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. Torres eventually confessed to the Zion murders as part of a plea deal, agreeing to serve additional time in prison. However, he refused to reveal all the details of his heinous act, leaving the victims' families with mixed emotions after years of misdirected grief and anger. The resolution of the case exposed significant flaws in the initial investigation. By fixating on Jerry Hobbs, The police had allowed Torres to evade capture and continue his violent spree. This tunnel vision not only led to a wrongful conviction, but also allowed a dangerous predator to remain free, claiming more victims. As the dust settled, the community of Zion and the families involved grappled with the aftermath of years of injustice. The case served as a stark reminder of the fallibility of the criminal justice system and the devastating impact of wrongful convictions. It highlighted the critical importance of thorough investigations, the dangers of coerced confessions, and the power of DNA evidence in uncovering the truth. The DNA match between Jorge Isla Torres and the sample found on Laura Hobbs's body shattered the flawed narrative that had imprisoned an innocent man for 5 years. This single piece of genetic information brought a measure of justice to the victims and their families, demonstrating how scientific evidence can correct the course of a misguided investigation. Freedom should have been a cause for celebration, but for Jerry Hobbs, it opened the door to a new kind of prison. After his release, Jerry faced significant challenges in readjusting to life outside prison. The world had moved on without him, and he struggled to find his footing in a society that had labeled him a child killer for 5 years. Simple tasks became daunting challenges for a man who had been isolated from society for half a decade. Jerry's attempts to rebuild his life were complicated by substance abuse issues that developed in the wake of his wrongful conviction. The trauma of his experience led him to seek solace in drugs and alcohol, affecting his personal relationships and resulting in additional legal troubles. The impact of Jerry's false confession lingered long after his exoneration, casting a shadow over his relationships, particularly with his family. Trust, once broken, proved challenging to rebuild. Even those who believed in his innocence struggled to understand how he could have confessed to such a horrific crime. In a moment of reflection, Jerry shared his thoughts on why he initially confessed. "I found my daughter dead," he said. "They didn't even need to try to break me." This statement revealed the vulnerability of a grieving father pushed to his limits during a grueling interrogation. The public and media reacted with outrage to Jerry's case, particularly regarding the police's handling of the investigation. Many questioned how an innocent man could be coerced into confessing to a crime he didn't commit. The case sparked debates about interrogation techniques and the reliability of confessions obtained under duress. Despite the clear miscarriage of justice, none of the officers involved in Jerry's coerced confession faced significant consequences. This lack of accountability raised concerns about oversight in law enforcement and the mechanisms to prevent such errors in the future. Jerry's case highlighted systemic issues within the criminal justice system, particularly the dangers of tunnel vision in investigations and the potential for coerced confessions to lead to wrongful convictions. It underscored the need for reforms in police interrogation techniques and thorough, unbiased investigations. As Jerry's story gained national attention, it became part of a broader conversation about wrongful convictions in America. His case was not an isolated incident, but rather an example of a pervasive problem in the justice system, raising questions about how many other innocent individuals might be languishing behind bars due to similar mistakes or misconduct. The challenges Jerry faced in rebuilding his life after prison were numerous and complex. From battling addiction to mending fractured relationships and overcoming the stigma of his wrongful conviction, every step forward was a struggle. His journey serves as a sobering reminder that exoneration is not the end of the story for those wrongfully convicted, but often the beginning of a new and difficult chapter. Jerry Hobbs's case exposes critical flaws in the criminal justice system, revealing the devastating consequences of tunnel vision and coerced confessions. Investigators focused solely on Jerry, dismissing crucial physical evidence that contradicted their narrative. This allowed the real killer, Jorge Isla Torres, to evade capture for years, claiming more victims. The case underscores the importance of thorough, unbiased investigations and the dangers of relying on confessions obtained under duress. Jerry's wrongful conviction left an indelible mark on his life, his family, and the entire community of Zion. After his exoneration, Jerry struggled to rebuild his life, while his family endured years of stigma and emotional turmoil. The families of Laura and Crystal were denied closure, and public trust in law enforcement eroded significantly. In response to cases like Jerry's, many jurisdictions have implemented reforms such as mandatory recording of interrogations and the establishment of independent review boards. Organizations like the Innocence Project continue to work towards exonerating the wrongfully convicted and advocating for systemic change. The public can support these efforts through donations, volunteering, and raising awareness about wrongful convictions in America. Jerry Hobbs's case serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for vigilance and reform in our justice system.